consider, 2 of which are related, along with the report on planning appeals. I am happy with this and intend to take the business in the order set out on the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor R. Hall and Councillor J. Ridgway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock is on his way. Item 2, declaration of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and/or other interests not already on their register of interest in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Liggett?
Yeah, I'm speaking on the first application. Once I've spoken, I'll be leaving the room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. We've now had the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of November 2022. Those from the 13th of December will go out on our next meeting. Are we happy that they are a correct record? Thank you. Can I have a show of hands? Thank you. The minutes have been passed. Moving on to the main minutes. The main business, I should say, sorry. Before we start, I would like the clerk to explain for the benefit of members, speakers, and those watching on YouTube how we will deal with them.
Thank you, Chair. This is the procedure for considering the business this afternoon. The Chair will introduce an application, then ask the planning officers to refer members to any late comments or updates received. These updates have been published on the Council's website and hard copies have been circulated to you. After this, the Chair will ask any speakers to address the meeting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to put forward their views. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of the 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points they have made. After the speaker has addressed the committee and answered any questions, then they will be allowed to remain in the meeting, but they will not be allowed to participate further from that point. The Chair will then open up the meeting for questions to officers, a debate by the committee, and finally determination on the application by a vote. The votes will be taken by roll call. Finally, members, this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and a recording is being made. This recording will be placed on the Council's website. Please note that others may choose to copy this recording. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move to the first application, which is NED/21/01376/OL for Sherland. And I'll hand over to our planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a Section 73 application to vary planning conditions in order to provide a revised site access for the extant outline permission of 90 dwellings, which was allowed on appeal. The Highway Authority have raised no objections. Officers have sought independent legal advice and are of the view that the relocation of the site access is not a fundamental variation of the overall permission for 90 dwellings, that the application can be determined as a Section 73 application. The proposals are considered to be acceptable in terms of their impact on the character of the area and the adjacent conservation area. As set out in the report, proposals would have some impact on a TPO tree. However, this is considered to be preferable to the extant permission, which would have a greater impact on the TPO trees. First slide. This shows the application site in the centre of the screen. To the north, it backs onto existing housing on Hallfield Gate Lane. To the south is Sherland Golf Course. To the west is Hallfield Hall and the Hallfield Gate Farm in the conservation area. And the site lies adjacent to the Sherland settlement development limits and is in the countryside. This is the red line application site boundary. Conservation area is to the west around Hallfield Gate Farm. This is a submitted illustrative master plan showing the position of the new access running along the western boundary of 43 Hawfield Gate Lane. This is an extract of the illustrative master plan submitted for the extant scheme and the proposed access. This shows how the layout of the houses might be located. This shows the location of the proposed new access along with the visibility displays and its position next to the end tree. These trees are subject to a tree preservation order, and whilst this tree is to be retained, the works are likely to impact the tree. However, as set out in the report, this is considered to be a better solution than the extant site access. To the east, a new footpath is proposed to join up to the existing path on the southern side of Hawfield Gate Lane. This shows the approved site access between two TPO trees. This is the point of the existing access to Hawfield Gate Farm, and as set out in the report, the existing access has caused damage to the two trees either side, and the works to form the approved access would cause further damage to the trees. This is an illustrative plan showing the cross sections of the internal road. This plan and the following sections show how the access road might be achieved. The red line on the eastern edge of the access road is a proposed retaining wall. This shows the illustrative cross sections. Top one is 10 metres from the site access and the bottom 30 metres. These are illustrative and the final details would form part of the reserved matters. This is a photo taken for the junction of Byron Street and Hawfield Gate Lane looking towards the existing access, which is the approved access for the development. Two trees either side are the ones which will be impacted by the creation of the approved site access. And this shows the position of the site access and the affected tree. Part of the access would run under the tree canopy as set out in the report. This shows the front of number 43, where the new footpath would join up with the existing footpath, roughly where the Burgundy bin is sited on the left of the photo. A hedgerow would be replaced with a footpath and a 1.2 metre high fence. This is a photo showing the junction of Lilac Way on the right. The proposed access and the trees are on the left opposite the red van, and the approved access point can be seen beyond the post and rail fence. To the left is a grass verge and hedgerow at number 43. This slide is taken close to the new access, looking towards the approved access, and shows the land sloping down towards the access point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I believe we have several speakers for this. The first speaker is the ward member, Councillor Charlotte Cupit. Are you there, Charlotte?
Yeah, hi Chair. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, you've got 3 minutes. Off you go.
Perfect. So I'm here today as one of the ward members. I wouldn't usually speak on a technical variation application like this, but the problem for me is this isn't a variation because of the consequences it would have, both for the original application and crucially for the surrounding residents and area through what it's proposing. Today's application is seeking to vary the site access, as has been outlined, as approved by the planning inspector when this appeal was allowed, and to move it further down the lane. The variation essentially creates a dangerous crossroads at a place where there's a bend in the road, as you can see from figure 8 in your report. Having read the report and all documents in detail, I don't believe the consequences of this major change have been fully analysed or considered. For instance, the traffic survey and travel plan data submitted by the applicant dates right back to 2017. As a further, I think, telling example, a search of the travel assessment document for this application to try to justify the movement of the access doesn't even mention once the Lilac Way junction it would now be opposite. And on page 27 of the assessment, the map is so out of date, it doesn't even include the 100 new homes now opposite too. Alongside concerns with the actual proposals on the table here today, at a higher level, proposing to move an access for the not inconsiderable number of 90 dwellings to all but create a crossroads is a very different application to what the inspector approved, due to the significant impacts of the internal layout of the site and the surrounding area as well. Moving the access would obviously mean that developers would have to push back houses up to where the road and access previously was. which would then be closer to the conservation area and listed hall and more visible. This can't and shouldn't be determined for me through this application or at a later reserved matters stage, because if permission is given for the movement of the access, it's automatically pretty much allowing the houses to be moved further up. When we combine this with some of the other things that would be allowed under this variation, such as a proposed new retaining wall, again a major change, and the removal of the hedgerows and planting, figure 9 of your report, that previously screened the development site and area, I'm really concerned that this proposal is significantly munching away at the landscape harm of this development, which the inspector in the original appeal recognised and was keen to mitigate against. Section 7 of your committee report does weigh this balance up, and as with any legal matter, it's a judgment call for each member of the committee today on whether this really is a variation or not. And I hope some of the examples I've touched on demonstrate that I don't think it is. To this end, I know there are some residents' objections
30 seconds remain.
to the application, but even that doesn't convey the strength of feeling of how concerned residents are. The problem is that because this has been submitted as a variation, it's become a technical process, when, as I've outlined, I can't reach the conclusion that it is, because it goes back to the core principles of this development. Residents should get the chance to have more of a say on what is a major change and will have a significant impact. So I urge the committee to refuse this variation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No. Thank you, Charlotte. Our next speaker is Councillor Heather Liggett, another ward member. Three minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. The new entrance, I believe, does affect the whole application. Surely the entrance to a site is part of the overall application. The new entrance is too close to the entrance of Lilac Way, which is now also the entrance to the new Fox Hollies development, which is an extra 40 houses, so approximately 80 more cars using the exit onto Hallfield Gate Lane. Residents have come to me already because of the bad visibility pulling out of Lilac Way onto Hallfield Gate Lane. The proposed new entrance is at a part of the site which is much lower than the road, approximately 15 feet lower. This will require a retaining wall, which may even be gabions. How will that look from the conservation area of Hallfield Gate? The developer claims the new entrance will only damage one tree instead of the two trees at their first entrance. Apparently, these two trees may already have suffered damage, so now we could be talking about 3 TPO trees being damaged, plus the removal of a mixed hedge, 7.7 in your packs, for a pavement that goes nowhere, as the south pavement on Hallfield Gate Lane ends before Lane House, several hundred yards short of the A61. So everyone will have to cross to the north pavement to safely reach the A61 for buses and the primary school. We already have a problem with Hallfield Gate Lane. The north side of Hallfield Gate Lane has 2 rows of terraced houses, so no off-road parking, which means all day, every day, a solid line of parked cars. This has meant for months a few residents are leaving their burgundy bins on the pavement as a preventative method of stopping cars mounting the pavement and running the whole length of the lane on the pavement. There have been dozens of accidents on the brow of the hill. Also, a child was knocked down having stepped off the school bus due to the mayhem of parked cars. As stated by a resident, this is a rural lane used by very large tractors and trailers all year round. The photos that you've been shown, committee, show the lane, the west side of the lane, not where all the housing and issues are. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Councillor. Our next speaker is Mr. Richard Southley. Is an objector. If you'd like to state your name and you understand you've got 3 minutes.
What's this, do I? Yes. Hello, good afternoon. I'd like to say that I'm of the same opinion as the other 20-odd people who have submitted objections to this latest proposed development site entrance change, as it is in an even more dangerous location than the original, being closer to the junction at Lilac Way with further visibility issues and at the narrowest point of the lane. I'd also like to mention that the original application was rejected at all local levels, only succeeding upon national appeal. Objections to this development are well documented, and the proposed new access and the resultant changes to the built layout are not sufficiently minor enough to warrant consideration under the section, as these are amendments which should form part of a new application. Furthermore, in addition to this, Severn Trent have submitted their concerns and comments regarding drainage plans for the above and disposal of both surface water and foul sewerage. They also say they may need to undertake a more comprehensive study of the catchment to determine if capital improvements are required. The reason for this is to ensure the development is provided with a satisfactory means of drainage, as well as to reduce the risk of creating or exacerbating flooding and pollution. To my knowledge, no undertaking of the above has been submitted by the applicants. And again, this should be obtained before any permission to go ahead is granted. I'm particularly and personally disturbed by this, as I live at the Old Gas Cottage down Pit Lane, which lies south of the proposed development. And in my original letter expressed concern at the lack of any plans by JDA regarding the issue of surface water storage or flooding, as in their technical considerations heading in section 4, they falsely claimed that the site does not fall within an area at being at risk from flooding, and went on to say that the flood risk is low and that it would not displace floodwater in the 1 in 100 year event, and therefore no floodwater storage or mitigation measures were required or proposed. In recent years, our property has flooded twice and our garden many
30
times.
seconds remain.
We have invested a lot of time and money digging deeper and wider culverts, creating a larger stream, but year on year, we need to dig the stream deeper and wider with the more developments that are generated and granted. We are left to our own devices to get rid of the surface water, sometimes mixed with foul sewerage, which leaves us with many undesirable items, including toilet tissue, sanitary plugs, condoms, and the like. I ask you to please reject this application for the reasons I've set out above.
That's time, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? No, if you'd like to take your seat. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Kevin Bush.
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm Kevin Bush.
3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. So my main points are the proposed resiting of the access will move it to what must be the most dangerous point on the frontage of the site. The traffic assessment submitted is out of date to the point of being useless, as there have been hundreds of new homes built not only in Sheridan but the surrounding areas as well, all of which have significantly increased traffic pressure on the lane. The proposal to move the access has majorly altered the boundary of the original approval and has a substantial effect on the site housing and road plan layouts. Proposed housing has been squeezed to the east of the site to achieve the proposed changes. The work required to create the proposed access is not trivial. Retention walls and embanking will be required, which will be ugly and industrial in appearance and totally out of keeping with the surrounding area. I believe the substantial nature of these factors, as well as the fact that a new Section 106 agreement will need to be approved, dictate that the proposed changes are not minor variations and should not be considered as Section 73A changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our final speaker, Mr. Paul Webster. 3 minutes when you're ready, Mr. Webster.
Sorry, could you use your mic? Thanks.
Hello, can you hear me? Yep. Sorry, this will be short and sweet. A lot of the information to support this change of access has already been mentioned. I'm just here really as a fellow neighbour supporting the decision to move this access, which is totally out of order. The houses that have been put in place, and again, just revisiting what the other people have said in the access and the danger to the road. I just believe that, as the traffic goes more sort of east on Orfieldgate Lane, it becomes quite very, very dangerous, especially for the additional parking that I've noticed recently, where people are parking on the lane to access the school, for dropping children off and things. It's creating a lot of unnecessary. I believe that a whole new application needs put in place as it's a total change. And again, I've spoken to people about the water that is obviously collected on the field where the planning is going to be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? If you'd like to take your seat, it's fine, thank you. Are there any questions for the planning officers? My goodness. Councillor Elliott, then Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian or Phil, I don't know who's going to end up answering it. What is the actual reason behind moving the site entrance? What's the actual reason?
They've not provided an actual reason.
That's what worries me.
Well, obviously, unfortunately, the agents or the applicant aren't here to be able to answer that, but they've submitted the application, and obviously we then need to determine it. But the actual why they don't want to implement the extant rather than this, then they haven't provided that now.
Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. How many of the trees with TPOs on are proposed to be destroyed?
None are proposed to be removed, but there's two where the existing access is, which have been impacted by the works that have gone ahead already and will be further impacted by the implementation of the approved scheme. The proposed access would impact one tree.
And you consider that okay if it impacts a tree that's been there all these years and serves the purpose as ever, when we're encouraged all the way around the country to be planting trees, and the impact of this is going to cause this tree probably to die because of the damage to the root protection area.
It's a case of we either allow 2 trees to be damaged or 1 tree to be damaged. So this is seen as the lesser of 2 evils, if you like.
Surely it would be better not to damage any of the trees.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Elliott.
Sorry for this coming back to you. When you gave your presentation, you said there was likely to be some impacts on the trees if the new egress was given permission. What is the impact on those trees? Do you mean they're actually coming down, or they could be damaged, or?
It's set out in paragraph 7.39 of the report. Our tree officer's view is that the widening of the access as approved by the inspector will cause significant damage to both of the trees either side of that access. The tree officer advises that the newly proposed access to the east of the TPO trees is the better option, as whilst the new access appears to show it cutting through the root protection area of one of the protected trees, this will have a lesser impact overall on the TPO trees. So that's why we've come to the conclusion that we've come to.
Chair, just on that point, to add to what Phil's said, is as officers we've tried to be transparent about that and accept that there will be an impact on the one tree, as Phil said, but the advice we've got from the tree officer is that impact is the lesser of the 2 outcomes and affecting the 2 trees that lie outside the radius of the approved scheme. So if you were to refuse consent this afternoon, the applicant could still go ahead with the extant permission with the impact on the 2 trees. If you were to grant consent this afternoon, that would have the impact on the 1 tree. And so that is the balance that we as officers have come forward with in our recommendation. we believe that impact is the lesser of those two situations that we prefer not to be faced with. But we are faced with one that can go ahead. We believe that the one tree being impacted is the lesser of those two evils in effect, and that's the balance that we've concluded on. So quite a simple planning judgment from an officer point of view, and members will need to take a view whether you agree with that, notwithstanding the other matters that you might throw into the mix. But that's the issue on the arboricultural issue that we've concluded.
Right, I've got a list here. Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Hancock, followed by Councillor Armitage, and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, I think I've heard this right. It said that possibly 2 trees in the permission that's already been granted could already have been damaged.
That's correct, yeah.
So in effect, we could be damaging 3 trees. It's the extent to what I want to know about the first 2 trees. It's the extent to the damage what's been caused already. And will that have an impact further down the line?
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just intrigued as to why officers feel that this is a minor amendment, because obviously it's quite significant and the arboricultural aspect is just one aspect, but that in itself doesn't really explain why overall you feel that it's a minor amendment, but it seems to be a pretty major one.
We've set out that quite comprehensively in the report. We've sought independent legal advice from a barrister on whether it can be dealt with under Section 73. The description of the application isn't changing. It's now an application for 90 dwellings served from a single point of access. So what they're doing is they're relocating the access from one point to another. So it's still going to be 90 dwellings served from a single point of access onto Hall Billgate Lane. So in that respect, we consider that it can be treated as a Section 73 application to vary the conditions.
Right.
Yeah, Chair, just to add to what Phil's been said, the issue of whether it's minor or not, that doesn't actually appear in the legislation. There's no definition of what is minor or not. The Section 73 merely allows an application to be made to implement a permission without compliance with the originally imposed conditions. You can then impose other conditions to replace them if you like, but the issue about minor, and we as officers use that phrase as well, but minor is not a word that appears in Section 73 itself. It's just an application to implement development without compliance with originally imposed conditions. So my advice to members will be to try not to get too wedded to the issue of whether it's minor or not. In effect, you're being asked to grant an alternative permission to the one that's been granted on appeal. And you need to consider that in terms of the changes that are proposed in this instance. They are related, as Phil has just said, to the access point, because all the other matters will be dealt with at any reserve matters application. So if you were to grant permission this afternoon, the applicant would have 2 options. You can implement the original or any new permission you grant. If you were to refuse it, they would just be able to implement as it stands the originally approved scheme.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian, because I've had that argument before with officers in terms of that. And with respect to Phil, it's not really that comprehensive, because yeah, all they're doing is they're tweaking stuff to make sure they fit within the same description. It's not really saying why you feel that moving the road is not a huge issue, moving the access point is not a huge issue. So that's what I'm trying to get to, because obviously that's really one of the key things, isn't it, in terms of this with its new location. Warrant it being a whole new application.
I come back to the report. There are 9 paragraphs in the report on the legal opinion. It's not changing the operative part of the permission. It's 90 dwellings served up a single access. So it can be dealt with as a variation of the condition.
Councillor Armitage, then Councillor Jones, then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So all these trees all have TPOs, am I right? That's the two trees that.
On the, yeah. On the frontage of Hawthorne Gate Lane.
Right. Right, if you damage if a tree dies off, you're likely to be fined, because you've not, checked with the, root protection area. And no doubt that, the, developer will have taken this into consideration. And it's like my learned friend on the left here said, you're going to end up, or could end up, with 3 dead TPO trees. And my argument is, what's the point of having a TPO if you're going to allow them to be damaged and die off? The second point is, am I right in assuming that this traffic survey was done in 2017?
The traffic survey is dated.
Phil, could you use your mic, please?
Traffic surveys dated November 20, the traffic assessments dated November 21, but the information within it, the appendices do, yes, they do date back to 2016. However, the highway implications of development are still going to be 90 dwellings onto Hawthorne Gate Lane. And the Highway Authority haven't raised an issue on the transport assessment, and they have had no objection to the proposals. So yes, while some of the information within that transport survey is dated, that there's still going to be the 90 dwellings going on Hawthorne Gate Lane from the approved scheme.
But am I right in assuming that since that 2017 information was given, there's been a close on another 100 houses developed nearby, which weren't taken into consideration at this point? And we can't really accept the accuracy of this, surely.
If it was a new application, I would agree with you, but we're talking about an ex-stamp permission for 90 dwellings. There's already 90 dwellings going on to that it was approved in 2 years ago.
I think that's the important point in this as well, Chair, that there is an extant permission granted on appeal that can be subject to approval of reserve matters, can be implemented without the submission of any additional highway data, any additional highway information. Permission was granted on appeal for that access position as part of that approved scheme. So that is an extant permission that, subject to approval of those reserve matters, can be implemented without any additional information. And as Phil said, in this instance, the Highway Authority have not raised any objections. So your statutory advisors have not raised any objections from a highway point of view to this revised access. And again, that as officers, Chair, that's what we've placed weight on in supporting the views of those experts.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I was going to just support what Councillor Cooper said about the impact on the 3 trees. 2 have already been impacted. Am I right by that? Because of things that started, and we can't, if the other development of the other access is happening, how are they going to get machinery to that? Are they going to go through the one that's already there and round the back? I think we could end up like Councillor Armitage says, with the 3 trees being irreparably damaged.
Yes, well, like I say, the works that have already been done have created a problem, and if they implement their approved scheme, then there will be further damage to those trees, according to our tree officer. So, yeah.
Councillor Elliott?
Thanks, Chair. I'm moving away from trees and back to, I'm still not particularly satisfied by the answer given about why they want to move the access. That's the portion I'm not satisfied with. I know you don't have to ask, and I know there's extant, and I know the highways thing I read on 4.3, Councillor Armitage, that it says it was last looked at in 2021, not in 2017. But my fear for it is, with the highways thing, they may have looked at it then, but did they take into consideration the new development and
and the amount of houses that were being built close by and the movements of vehicles. And the flip side to all that is, were they given the latest plans, not working off old maps, the latest plans showing that development? It may have come to a different conclusion, or am I wrong with that, Phil? I don't know.
I can't answer for the Highway Authority. I'm afraid they've confirmed they've got no objections. They've been consulted on the information that we've got.
So you wouldn't know if they have the latest plans showing the new developments?
I presume that they've got the same plans that we have in terms of the ordnance survey, which will show it. Yeah.
Lisa, did you want to speak?
I was actually struggling to hear what Councillor Elliott was saying. No, it's fine. I think, Chair, if I may, I think what members have got in front of them is a legal opinion about the mechanism of how this application has been brought about. You have evidence before you from the professionals, the experts, I suppose, in terms of the Highways Authority. We can't go behind or look behind what information they may or may not have taken into consideration. You've also got the advice from the tree specialist or professional who's provided some advice with regards to the impact on the trees in question. I think it's about bringing all that information together for the members when they come to debate and make their decision, really. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Councillor Hartshorn?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is there anything, with regard to the extant entrance, what will happen to that entrance once, if we were to grant permission for this one?
If permission was granted for this, as Aidan said earlier, they would have in effect two permissions. So they could either implement the original one, or they could implement this section 73. They couldn't do both. So that access, if they implemented the approved permission, would stay as it is. Just serving Portfield Gate Farm.
Any further questions? No, I'm going to ask the clerk now to go through the motions before we put that through.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, that a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then that amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved, which goes against officer recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations falls, or in other words, it is not passed, that doesn't mean that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or a different course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. Now, in terms of the timings of the motions, these should be moved and seconded after the committee has heard, read and discussed the evidence before it. The chair will indicate when this point has been reached and then will invite members to put motions forward. Members will be reminded of this by the clerk if they wish to propose a motion before then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I shall open the floor for debate. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I've got no objection in principle to this development. It's gone through a rigorous process. It's already gone through the planning inspectorate, and it's come back as something which is, which has got merit, and it's been given permission. So no objection in principle. But when you look at all the things that have been mentioned here, and I'd consider many of these major changes. We got the creation of a crossroads, which is in a reportedly dangerous position. Reportedly, we've got all traffic information dated back to 2017, and it is from 2017. It doesn't cover the new recent 100 homes very nearby on the other side of the road. It doesn't cover the planned developments at Park Lane. And as for, we've heard highways being mentioned a few times, quite a few times, and mentioned by officers that they've not opposed it. Well, highways don't, in my opinion, and I think in many people's opinion, oppose many things at all. So I choose my words carefully on that. So for me, when it comes to highways not objecting, that shouldn't be seen as, for me, a green light. That should be seen as they've just not objected, as in they've not said anything. We've had no response. That's how I see highways now. That's as much weight I put on that department. The returning walls, which have been mentioned several times, and I said to be able to keep in with the surroundings, the removal of a large extended hedge, the 3 threatened trees, and I take the point that it's 1 tree and 2 trees. I take that point. The concerns around visibility for road safety, and also we've heard that there may need to be a new section 106 agreement. Now, all of those things put together, that's quite a long list, and I think there were a few more points there. We're asked here to consider this as a variation of section 73. Now, page 21, 7.8, a section 73 application is an application for planning permission for the development of land without complying with conditions subject to which a previous permission was granted. So it's about taking those conditions away. Now, if you think it's been through that process already, it's been through the process where it came locally, and it's been through a planning inspector. The planning inspector has put those conditions on for a reason. It was looked at thoroughly the first time, and proper regard was given to this. Detailed regard, not just here, not just through our process with the officers, not just through this planning committee that turned it down, but also in depth, and it's an appeal. So this, the builders are wanting to do away with those actual conditions. Now, those conditions have been looked at in too much detail for us here just to grant that variation. And I think it thoroughly warrants that this is a full new application, again, because of those reasons. And it's only fair. You can see the level of objections we've got and the level of interest we've got from ward members and residents. It is that there's an awful lot of concern around this application. And we won't do it justice here to let this variation go through. Absolutely not. It's not that I'm against this development, it's that it needs looking at properly. And we're only being responsible, I believe, by letting this be a full new application. So that's my view, Chair. Thank you.
Any other comment from anyone?
Just
Councillor Armand?
apologies,
sorry.
Chair. No, if I can just come back again when appropriate, please.
Okay. Councillor Armitage?
I agree with what Councillor Foster said all the way through. You know, there's too many different things that have gone on here, and we need to look at them. The other thing is, at other planning committees, we actually have somebody from that. I've seen other people, other authorities have somebody from highways. Now, isn't it time that we have somebody from the highway department who can speak and explain himself rather than just getting a blurb from them saying it, no problems?
As you mentioned, highways, that is happening from January with someone coming to talk to us.
Just on the points that have been made, Chair, if I may, first of all, the point that Councillor Armitage has made regarding highway advice, as you've just mentioned, there is a representative from the Highway Authority coming to give you some discuss with you highway issues and their comments prior to planning committee in January, I understand. But up to this point, whilst we have asked on a number of occasions for highway colleagues to come to planning committee, their advice has been, no, you have our advice, and we're not able to service every planning authority in Derbyshire's planning meetings, but that may change in the future. In terms of the issues that have been raised, Chair, in effect, members are being asked to consider whether the scheme that was approved in outline with the access approved on appeal is acceptable in its revised form. So you're being asked whether the scheme in its whole can be implemented, but with the 3 conditions as set out in the report altered. So you are at liberty to now consider whether this revision in its form is acceptable. So you can take into account issues of whether the new access is in the correct place, issues of highway safety, impact on the trees. You're very welcome to take into account those issues because they impact directly on what would be a revised scheme. So you can take those into account now, and you don't need another application necessarily to do that. If you don't believe that the application before you this afternoon is acceptable for those reasons that you've discussed, then you're at liberty, quite within your rights, to refuse it for those reasons. And then the applicant either has to revert back to the permission granted or seek redress on appeal, potentially. So you do have that opportunity now, and those issues are all material to this issue. So as officers have set out in the report, our view on them is clear, and we believe that on the balance, that the revised scheme would be acceptable. That's the decision you need to take this afternoon. However, as I often mention to committee, you've talked this afternoon and you've heard about issues of highway safety, danger, new position being dangerous in terms of creating a crossroads. All we have in terms of the evidence is the information put before us and the advice that we received from the Highway Authority on that. So again, I would caution you on placing weight on comment, hearsay without evidence. And this afternoon, I've not heard any technical evidence why all those elements would amount to there being an impact on an adverse impact on highway safety. So again, Chair, I just ask members to caution the weight that you're placing on comment made, and you need to be sure, if you're minded to refuse the application on issues of highway safety, that you're happy that you have evidence to support that if tested on appeal. Hope that's helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Right, I'll ask for someone to put forward a motion. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that this revision is not acceptable, and that the applicant should rely on the extant permission, which they've already got.
You've beaten Councillor Elliott's got there before you, William.
And if we're looking for reasons, Chair, it's all the reasons as stated initially, which is that these are major changes. They're considered major changes, and you can cite all the ones, I'm sure they're recorded, but going back, the traffic information's old and does not take into account all the recent buildings, recent applications, the new homes, the retaining walls, the removal of a large extended hedge, the threatened trees, and the concerns around visibility for road safety. So if we include all of those, yeah, the potential crossroads. Thank you, Chair.
Happy with that?
If I may, Chair, listening to the debate and the comments of Councillor Foster, it does seem to me as though there may be two different elements to the concerns of members. The first relates to highway safety, and Councillor Foster's talked, Chair, about the date of the original information, the visibility that's been mentioned, visibility display, I presume, the proposed access, the creation of the crossroads, and I think they were the main elements of that. And then there seemed to me to be an impact on character of the area in terms of trees, retaining wall, and the removal of the hedge. So my view, Chair, is that the debate I've heard is that members would be voting on two issues, one around highway safety and one around impact on the character of the area, and that would be, members are minded to refuse it. That would be an appropriate way of going.
Everyone okay with that?
So just to be clear then, Chair, it's to refuse the application contrary to officer recommendations on the grounds, well, two grounds which have just been discussed there, because of the, well, first of all, because it's not a simple, sort of, how can I put it, revision. It's actually more than that. And in particular, two areas in which it's more than that, around highway safety, and in particular, this information, this question about whether the information used by highways was up to date, the visibility of access and the creation of a crossroads as one stream. And then the second one would be on the impact on the character of the area, in particular, the three mentioned trees, the retaining wall, and hedgerows. Is that the essence of it, members?
That's fine, Chair. Thank you.
We'll now move to the vote, which is going to be by roll call, because I like doing it like that.
Right, thank you, Chair. Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Foster. 4. Councillor Hancock. 4. Councillor Hartshorn. 4. Councillor Jones. 4. Councillor Powell. Councillor Rouse.
4.
And Councillor Rough.
4.
That's unanimous, Chair. The motion's passed.
Thank you all very much.
We could just wait one moment, Chair, while we get Councillor Liggett back in.
And do you need to change tag team?
We're on his way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Bush. Can you now just close your account? Hello, Martin. I think Mr. Bush's account has been remained open. Would you be able to remove him, please? Yes. Would you be able to remove the Kevin's account from the room, please?
Okay, round two. Our next application is for Sherland. Oh, no, it's not, it's Stretton, I beg your pardon, which is NED/22/00884/RM. This is being taken by Graham Cooper.
Just before Graham comes in, Chair, just to update members in respect of a late representation that was sent to all members of Planning Committee this morning at 10 o'clock via the email. So I'm presuming that all members have seen and been able to read that. So I won't go into detail, Chair, but just for the record, just to state that we had a comment in from Mr. Harries at 10 o'clock this morning, which was copied into all members. So I won't go into any details, Chair, but of course, as we go on, if there are any queries and questions, happy to accept them.
Thank you. Over you to Graham.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We'll just wait for the I'll just wait for the presentation to come in front of us. So, hi, Chair, members. Hope you're all right. So this is item 2. And it's the first of 2 applications members will be considering today at land east of Prospect House, High Stairs Lane, Stretton. This is a Section 73 application to vary Condition 1, approved plans, to vary previously approved layout and landscaping details. A number of late representations have been received, which have been reported to members in the late representations pack and verbally today by Adrian. It's worth noting that the previous permission for 28 dwellings remains extant and work is commencing on site. The main issue here being whether or not the changes to the layout and landscaping details are acceptable on the site, and the impact on the surrounding area, the impact on residents' privacy and amenity, and the impact on the trees to the west of the site. So this slide that's before you here illustrates the site shaded in orange. The A61 there lies to the east, High Stairs Lane to the south. A band of trees, some of which are protected by TPO, are located at the western boundary of the site. Prospect House lies beyond this band of trees to the west. You'll probably just make it out there on the left. This property is approximately about 35 to 40 metres away from this boundary. There's a few properties to the south on High Stairs Lane. So that's the location plan there in front of members. And so that's the application site in red and other land under the applicant's control in blue. Next slide. So this slide illustrates the proposed layout for 28 dwellings and also shows the previously approved root protection area shaded red around the trees to the west of the site. I'll refer to that as the RPA moving forward. The next slide, please. So this slide offers a visual comparison between previously. So this, if you can make out, you've got a comparison of. So this is if we move forward one slide. So this, no, that's fine. Thank you. So this slide, so apologies about that. So it's just more zoomed in version of the site plan and compares the previously approved RPA illustrated with a dashed line. It also illustrates a new proposed protective fence line with a dot dash line. Hopefully you can make that out. This proposed protective fence line is further away than the previously approved RPA and is in the most part further away from the agreed RPA. In agreement with the tree officer of the council and the applicant, conditions to remove permitted development rights for works at properties along the western boundary of the application site and a scheme of soil amelioration are recommended. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates the proposed landscaping scheme, which differs slightly from that previously approved, and then it includes additional bird and bat boxes along the properties along the northern edge of the site and replaces a laurel hedge with a more native species planting hedge. Next slide, please. So members who attended the virtual site visit yesterday will have seen a comprehensive suite of site photos. These next few slides offer a reminder of the key features. This photo being taken from the site entrance, and you can see the trees along the western boundary of the site in the background there. Next one, please. So this photo is just taken a bit further up High Stairs Lane, across a view west towards the western boundary of the site. You can see the protective fencing that's been installed on site. And the final photo. This is taken from the grounds of Prospect House and looks east towards the proposed development. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to our first speaker once I've found my list, which is, I believe, Lucy Harris. Mrs. Harris, before you start, I understand your husband can't be here this afternoon, so I'm going to allow you 5 minutes instead of the normal 3. So when you're ready.
It's essential that the impact of significant changes to the development as proposed today are given a full and fair consideration. I note that the developer breached a number of planning conditions already in place to protect the trees under a TPO within the first few weeks that they started work. I know because I stopped the diggers myself. So the existing approved scheme used the council-funded John Booth tree report following issues with the tree information submitted by the previous applicant. We had argued strongly that the measurements used in this approval were wrong, but this committee approved the development using the methodology and data contained within the John Booth report. On receiving details of this application, we requested that the current tree officer, David Cunningham, visit the site and look at our concerns, particularly given the proposed changes on scale and layout. So David and Graham Cooper attended our site and took measurements, and finally proved that there were inaccurate measurements and agreed that these needed to be corrected. So great, finally, somebody was listening. There's a new application and there's a real opportunity to put this right. So when the correct measurements are put into the approved John Booth methodology, they show that in fact there are buildings within the root protection area. So this is an opportunity. These buildings could be moved at this stage. This could be corrected and the trees could be given proper protection. We waited for feedback after the visit, and we waited and we waited and we received no response from the tree officer or from Mr. Cooper. Then this meeting got booked. The officer sends out his report stating there's been a change to the methodology from that was used by John Booth. He'd grouped the trees together to use the largest tree to determine the maximum extent of the roots. And when the correct measurements are used, these give maximum protection to the roots. The method for determining the RPA in today's application referenced in the officer's report is an unapproved and undocumented method. I mean, what else can I say when today there is no tree report from that visit and the updated measurements? So if this is so critical, why has it not been shared? We've contacted officers repeatedly. We've asked for today's meeting to be deferred to allow that information to be put together fairly and comprehensively in the same way that the John Booth report was. I mean, has a tree report even been written off the back of that visit? Who knows? You can see for yourselves in figure 3 on the planning officer's report that the changes in this application have led to the buildings being removed in relation to the RPA. Sadly, today I'm not allowed to show you drawings where if you take the approved methodology and the correct measurements, it does show that with the revised scheme, there is encroachment into the RPA in plots 6 and 7. Now, obviously, it's not just me saying that the application must remain in line with the John Booth report. This was laid down in the approval documentation of this scheme in 2018 and 2019. It was actually labelled on one of the site plans that was shown a few minutes ago. Both documents state, as I'm sure you'll be familiar with, that the development shall hereby be carried out in accordance with this plan unless otherwise subsequently agreed through formal submission under amendment procedures. There has been no submission to approve an alternative methodology in this application. In fact, there's been no alternative tree survey submitted to determine any changes from the John Booth report. All we have are a few comments in the officer's report. I note the tree officer made further comments that were uploaded to the portal at 3 p.m. yesterday. This was following the tree officer advising us just a few hours earlier that he wasn't able to respond to our questions ahead of today's meeting. But to be honest, a rushed email clearly made in response to our late comments doesn't change the approved plans and the requirements for the RPA. would rather think that it's somebody trying to cover themselves for what is a pretty embarrassing situation. This application must be rejected today, as when the approved methodology is used with the correct measurements, the RPA is encroached. It's that simple. And at the end of the day, all we are asking for is transparency, fairness, and protecting the trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Thank you. If you'd like to take your seat. I believe we have another speaker, John Millhouse, the agent. I have 3 minutes when you're ready. Are we going to give them 5 as well? Yeah. Okay, 5 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, everybody. My name is John Millhouse. I'm a Chartered Town Planner, and I'm here today representing the applicants Meadowview Homes. I'd like to thank officers for a thorough report and for their recommendation for approval. The previous owners of this site, Wild Goose Homes, had obtained all the necessary consents and made a technical start to the development before going into administration. My clients, Meadowview Homes, purchased the site earlier this year with an extant planning permission, meaning that they are entitled to complete the approved development, and indeed works are well underway on the roadways and the groundworks. But as is normal in the development industry, they want to build their own house types, hence these applications. Now, this first application considers layout and landscaping, so I'll touch on those 2 points. In terms of layout, the layout is very similar to the approved layout. The access is in the same place, all the roads are in exactly the same place, and the houses are in a very similar position. That said, it is not necessary for the layout to be identical for this scheme to be acceptable. The question is whether the changes are acceptable in planning terms. There's only been one objection to this scheme, and it suggested that the size and scale of the proposal has increased significantly. And I understand that is the reason why this application is before committee this afternoon. I strongly disagree with this interpretation. The overlay plan, which was on the screen earlier, clearly shows that the layout is extremely similar. Some of the plots are slightly larger, others are slightly smaller, and some garages have become integral, but the overall footprint of buildings has increased by less than 0.3%. The plot closest to the objector, plot 7, has increased by 1.5 metres, but its width has reduced by 0.9 metres. The eaves height has been reduced by 0.4 metres, and the ridge height has been reduced by 0.8 metres. And my measurements actually show that the plot is 56 metres from the neighbouring house, behind a substantial tree line. Regarding the trees, although the applicants are entitled to build the previously approved scheme, which means the previously approved tree protection fence line, my clients have independently commissioned their own new tree survey. This has been independently verified by your own tree officer. And if I could just quote your tree officer from the officer's report, who says, "The protective fencing plan looks ideal and appears to demonstrate we can both successfully support the proposal and protect the nominal RPAs of retained trees." So we're not relying on old reports that have been questioned. We've had a new tree survey. And what's really important here is the new tree line that's being offered, even though the applicants can build to the old one, is further away from the trees. So if this application is approved, the trees will be better protected than the existing permission. The improved fence line has already been installed on site to the satisfaction of your enforcement officer at a site meeting. And at the request of the planning officer, the applicants have agreed to plant a native hedgerow along the road front and install batten bird boxes. So in conclusion, Meadowview Homes are a Derbyshire-based house builder who bought the site. They employ local people. They've recently completed a similar development in this district at Wessington to a high standard. They bought a site that's had a planning permission for housing since 2014, so it's been included in the council's housing delivery numbers. They bought it in good faith. They want to finish the development. In doing so, they'll help meet the district's housing needs. They'll honour all the affordable housing contributions that have been set out in the 106 agreement. The scheme has been thoroughly scrutinised by your officers. It's obtained the support of the case officer, the tree officer, and the enforcement officer on site. All we ask for is that the applicants are allowed to continue to build without any further unnecessary costly delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I have one quite simple one. Plot 7. Could you bring it up, Graham, the layout of the site, if possible?
Just bear with me a second, Chair, please. I'm sure it's possible. It's just whether I'm working. Is that helpful, Chair? Plot 7 is the one that's here.
That's it. So that's quite a distance, isn't it, from the nearest one, Prospect House, its nearest neighbour?
Prospect House, Chair, is the one that's outlined in green at the southwestern corner. That's Prospect House here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There are planting in front of that, aren't you? So that's the gap that's there will be filled in anyway over time. Thank you very much. Yeah. Would you like to take a seat?
Chair, just to be clear, the photographs that Graham went through earlier showed planting on the Prospect House side of the boundary rather than within the application site.
Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Graham, and when you gave your presentation, you said the fencing that had been put up to protect the tree roots was in part same. What did you mean by in part same? Is some closer to Prospect House boundary, further away? Because I'm now getting two different ideas of where it is. You know, the speakers have said it's closer, but the agent is saying it's actually further away and protecting them even more. Also, can you comment on the hedgerow? Because I know when this application went through back in whenever it was, I was on that committee as well. And they were moving the ancient hedgerows and putting them back on High Stairs Lane. But there's no mention of anything being planted by the contractor along the development side of Prospect House. Am I led to believe that you're saying the photo shows Prospect House and hedgerows that were there and it's up to them to screen it with hedgerows they plant?
Okay, so yeah, there's a few points that raised that.
So how you'll manage?
That's going to be quite tedious, isn't it?
So hopefully this.
That is the previously approved root protection area, which we approved.
So I'm afraid that we've got a technical problem in here, Marston, so we'll just press ahead.
I'm quite happy for the question to be answered. I know that there is some form of hedge line there, but not a great deal.
That's the existing.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a better picture because you can see that there is a mature form of hedge line there. When you look at the layout, looked as if there was a gap. Yeah.
And that photograph, Chair, is the one that you referred to earlier. This is taken from within the garden of Prospect House.
Any other questions? Councillor Armitage?
It's been mentioned about the discrepancies in the actual measurements of one thing and another by one of the speakers. And I wonder if you could clarify as to which methodology you use and how accurate it is.
Okay. Okay, hopefully that you can hear from that. So I believe, and I'm not a tree expert, that Mr. Booth took the view that he grouped a collection of trees together to measure the distance rather than doing it individually. So when David and I, the tree officer, went to site, he suggested that was not the way that he would do things, and he would individually measure from those trees. So we took measurements from all those trees with Mr. and Mrs. Harries, and we came up with the root protection area. So what happened after that point is we put those measurements to the developer, the measurements that we collated on site. They produced a clean plan which showed the new root protection area. The tree officer reviewed that plan and found that it was in line with what he would expect. Hopefully that clarifies that matter.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Just staying on that, thanks, Chair. Just staying on that point, and obviously we've heard from one of the speakers talking about the lack of information on the planning portal with regards to the tree report or the lack of a tree report. Can we just, because for me as a member, I don't know which of those methods is the right method. We've gone from one method to another method, which can obviously give a little bit of a misunderstanding, I guess, to members. For me, I'd like to see whichever planning application it is, we're going to use a method that's consistent. So really, I'd like to know why the information has been put on there so late for people to be able to see that.
Just on that point, Chair, the issue around the information that David Cunningham has input into the application is from an officer point of view, purely and simply that it's an officer input, which we normally accept at any point, and it wouldn't be something that we would then seek comment on necessarily, like any comment that we got in from any consultee or any comment made by any officer previously. As members were aware, and Councillor Elliott may well recall this, the council didn't have its own qualified arboriculturalist, which is why we then sought the advice of Mr. Booth at that time. David Cunningham, recently appointed arboricultural officer, is a qualified arbor, and as you would expect, we place great weight on his advice, as we would with our heritage officer or with our own policy officers. So the methodology is not consistent. Absolutely, I think David would happily accept that, but he's taken a view that the methodologies Graham's outlined and measuring the appropriate RPA of the trees should be from the individual trees. And as you've seen from Graham's advice, that is actually greater in extent than Mr. Booth's methodology, where he took, as Graham said, a clump of trees and established his RPA from that. So again, as we discussed with the application previously, officers have taken the view that there is the extant fallback position, but that the opportunity is there now for an extended RPA to properly protect all the trees, which Graham and David have been out and individually measured with Mr. and Mrs. Harries. And therefore, from the advice we're getting from David, a qualified arboriculturalist, he is of the view that with the RPA on the line of the dotted dash line that Graham's talked about, that is going to properly protect the trees, is actually better than what could be fell back to. So if you again, the argument is the same as the last application. If you were to grant permission this afternoon, the applicant has two options, but he can't implement both. He has to implement one or the other. And as with the application at Hallfield Gate Lane, an officer view is that there is benefit from getting a greater RPA in this case, rather than the smaller RPA that could otherwise be used. I hope that explains it to Councillor Cooper, Chair, and hopefully in a way that you can understand the reasoning that we have had as officers in coming to our conclusion on this application.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you for that, Chair, and thanks for that, Adrian. Plot 6 basically abuts that RPA. Is that acceptable? It's literally on the line. I guess that's splitting hairs, but it really is on the line. Can you just help me out with that one, please?
Yeah, it must be me. Yeah. So hopefully you can see from the plan up there. You might not be able to see it from there, Councillor Cooper. If we can get it on there. But yeah, you're right. The garage for plot 6 is right on that line. I think what the advice is that David was telling me is that is the root protection area. It won't go into that area. And I think that David was advising that it is a guide to create the kind of maximum kind of protection for those trees. You know, the garage won't go into that RPA, and I think we're taking the view that that is acceptable. You know, we are taking as officers other measures above and beyond what we previously approved by removing permitted development rights for those properties all on that boundary, so to prevent hard standing extensions, outbuildings, and we think that will give a greater protection.
Any other questions? No, thank you. Shall I open the floor for debate? We all understand how to put a motion in if there's no debate. No, I'll put a motion on the table is to go with officers' recommendations.
Second that, Chair.
Okay. We'll go with a vote.
Right, Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Elliott.
Abstain.
Councillor Foster.
4.
Councillor Hancock. 4. Councillor Hartshorn. 4. Councillor Liggett.
Abstain.
Councillor Jones.
Oh, excuse me.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Rouse.
4.
And Councillor Roth.
4.
The motion has passed, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6 is again the same site. Is there anything any different the speakers wish to say on that? Yep, if you'd like to start, thank you. I'm allowing the same 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, just before you move, there is a slightly different presentation ahead of time, so if you want the officers to go through that first of all.
Okay, so thanks, Adrian. So this is the second of the applications at High Stairs Lane. This is a section 73 application to vary condition 1, the approved plans of planning approval 17768 RM to vary the scale and appearance details. So the main issues here being whether or not the changes to the scale and appearance details are acceptable on the site, the surrounding area, residents' privacy and amenity, and again on the trees to the west of the site. Next slide. Oh, no, go back one. Okay, thank you. So this is the same slide as before, illustrating the extent of the site in orange and shows the relationship with the surrounding area. So this and the next couple of slides have been submitted by the developer and offer an illustrative view of how the development may appear once constructed. Okay. So this is, and I'll show you a selection of the house types compared to those previously granted. So this house type is the Durham to be used on plots 4 and 5. Materials to be used on this and the scheme in general are red brick to complement the surrounding street scene. So the next slide, this is the previously approved house type for plots 4 and 5. Next slide, please. So this house type is the Barnard and will be constructed on plots 22 to 24. This will be a prominent house type as a terrace when viewed from the A61. And in comparison to the previously approved scheme house type in those plots. Next slide, please. So this house type, the Waterford, and this is used at the site entrance on plot 25. And in comparison, this is the previously approved house type in that location. And finally, so this is the Bamborough, and it'll be constructed on plot 7, close to the boundary with Prospect House. You'll note the 2 upper floor windows on the side elevation in that top right hand corner. They'll face towards Prospect House, but these can be conditioned to be obscurely glazed and have only high level opening. And in comparison, again, to the previously approved house type, this is the one plot 7, and this only had 1 window in the upper floor, and that was proposed to be.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Off you go.
Thank you. So the planning officer's report advised to the committee that the proposal was broadly the same that was previously approved, and that there were subtle changes to the scale and appearance of the dwellings. I'm afraid our analysis of the data, well, the data that's available or decipherable, shows that there is a significant impact on the scale and appearance, and that is why this application should be rejected today. So let's get into some specifics. 9 out of the 28 properties on the site have an increase in the number of bedrooms. That's 32% of the properties on the site. The total number of bedrooms increases from 94 to 103. This is a 10% increase in size. The previous scheme had no 5-bedroom properties. To accommodate this, these homes are significantly larger in their stature. But this also highlights impacts on the use of the development. Larger homes with more residents leads to impact on considerations on traffic movements, parking facilities. And by just glossing over the details, the impact of these changes, none of this has been properly considered. The simple comparison on the increase in bedrooms shows the increase in scale as the bedrooms need extra space. The houses are significantly bigger. Plot 7, as an example, has an increased width of 27% and an increase in 20% of its total footprint. The significant change impacts the overall aesthetics of the development with an increase of 15% larger first floor spaces. And all of the figures that I've used here, we've shared the details via email with all committee members, all of our workings and things. So I'm not sure where other figures have come from, but these are our findings with the information that's been made available to us. The building footprints in total cover 70 square metres more than the previously approved scheme. 6 of the 28 properties in the proposed application now have 3-storey living spaces. Previously, there were no 3-storey properties. The bigger houses, they need more windows. To take a specific example, the Wild Goose design at plot 1 was Hornbeam, so this lies on High Stairs Lane. The property had 13 windows. The proposed Meadowview home of Bamborough has 16 windows. The Bamborough property has an increase in the number of first floor windows in the side elevation, which overlooks properties Green End and Moorfields on High Stairs Lane. Do residents of Stretton not deserve to be protected from this invasion of their privacy? Why has this not been considered? Why has no mitigation even been considered to this change? The significantly larger properties, as already described, will result in large banks of properties, allowing for less light on site and to the neighbouring properties. You could see that on the drawings that have already been shared. The previous housing types allowed for undulating roof lines from the garages and allowed for a more open aspect to the development. As a specific example of these changes in relation to plots 15, 16 and 17 along the A61, the planning officer refers to the removal of some garages, but all this has done is to allow bigger, wider fronted properties at these 3 plots. And it'll create a wall of properties with little light able to pass through. These properties already tower over those already along the A61, and this will impact them even more. But again, I don't see that this has been considered. I recall the previous applications where we were provided with numerous different representations of what the development would look like from different angles, from different viewpoints around the site. And considering that we're looking at appearance today, I've not seen any evidence of this, so I suppose we're just supposed to use our imaginations. So it's very easy to gloss over these changes and determine each one of them as minor, but the committee needs to consider the collective impact of the changes. Why should a developer be allowed to flaunt the planning process by implementing a drastic change in a scheme with numerous impacts and then it only be deemed to be broadly the same? The application should be rejected due to the significant impact of the scale and appearance of this development.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Councillor Elliott.
Chair. Thank you. You're saying about the property on High Stairs Lane with 13 windows now with 16. Will that impact Prospect House?
No.
So the nearest, if I think rightly, on High Stairs Lane, the next property is a bungalow going towards the garage.
Yes.
On the other side of the road, probably some 50 metres away again.
Okay. So this, where the property that I'm talking about will lie is if you turn up the A60 up from the A61 towards Prospect House, there's a hedge that runs along the left-hand side. About where the opening of that driveway is will be the front of that house. The side elevation, which then looks towards the driveway, the gateway of Prospect House, is here. And then you have Green End and Moorfields. So those windows will look into those properties.
Do you know how far it is from each elevation to elevation? Roughly 40 metres, 50 metres?
No. Well, it'll be across the width of the lane and then the driveway and a little bit of front garden.
So 30 odd metres must be. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, thank you. You'd like to take a seat. Mr. Millhouse? Again, you're afforded the 5 minutes.
Thanks again. I'll keep this brief and limit it to scale and appearance, so I'm not repeating myself. So the main point I want to make is again that the suggestion that the size and scale has increased significantly is categorically not the case. It is true that 6 of the houses have an additional floor of accommodation, but these are loft conversions in effect. So what you would ordinarily be able to do on a permitted development, all 28 of the houses will appear as 2-storey properties, not 3-storey properties from the street. And an important fact, the ridge height of every single one of the 28 properties is actually lower than was what was previously approved. So none of them have got any higher. All of them have got a bit lower. So yeah, there's no meaningful increase in scale. Plot 7, as I said in my last speech, has got 1.5 meters longer. That's all, but it's also got narrower and lower. And the windows in plot 7 on the rear, on the previously approved scheme, there was a bathroom window to be obscure glazed. Now there'll be 2 bathroom windows to be obscure glazed, but those windows are smaller than the one previously approved. So, you know, in totality, there's very little meaningful difference. With regards to the appearance of the properties, we tried to stay close to the previously approved scheme, while still obviously incorporating Meadowview Homes' own house types. So there's a lot of traditional detailing in there. We've got red brick with ventilated corbel detail, a mixture of brick sills and arched headers, and some stone lintels and sills. We've got canopy porches, bay windows. All of these features appeared in the original approved scheme. All will reflect the local vernacular. We've submitted some visuals that have been on the screen just now. We've submitted also photographs of the Wessington development, which is quite similar. That's been built by Meadowview. In my view, a high quality design that is acceptable in planning terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Keen. Councillor Elliott.
I don't blame you for not wanting questions. And the three-bed properties that you say appear as a normal 2-story dwelling, are they situated along the main road, or are they situated on the edge down high stairs, or are they within the plot?
Within the plot, and it's 6 actually. To be fair, 6 of the properties will have, in effect, rooms in the roof. They're inside of the site, as it were, so further back into the site.
I would agree that in principle, they do look very similar, and to get the lessened ridge heights, etc. Is that the actual measurement of the build, or have you dug into the topography?
No, it's a measure of the build. We scaled off the drawings of the old scheme and the new scheme. So that's generally achieved by making the gables narrower. So you narrow the gable and the ridge tends to drop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Liggett.
I'm going again, sorry. Desperate to get away.
I just wondered if the extra bedrooms had meant that you'd had to change the extra car parking or extra hard standing from the original.
No, we don't believe there's any need to. The Highway Authority haven't recommended that that's necessary. That there's plenty of off-street parking being provided through driveways, garages, and such like. So yeah, we don't feel that that's necessary, and like I said, the highway officers haven't advised us that it's necessary either. So
make your escape quick. Are there any further questions? No, thank you. Now's the time to retreat. As there's no more questions, I'll open the floor for debate. Councillor Hancock.
Chair, it's just a request, if you don't mind. Would Graham just mind doing the comparisons between the 2 designs again, just bringing them up so that we can have a quick look at those again?
Do you mean the site plan, David, or the houses? Okay.
So this is the two-story property that is proposed, which has got accommodation over 3 levels. So this is the Durham. So this is plots. Yeah, plots 4, 5, 27, 28, and 20 and 21 within the scheme. So 6 units. And compared to the previously approved house type, that's what that looked like. So we just flip between. So very similar in appearance. You know, on the proposed scheme, the eaves are slightly lower. I think that helps just bring that height down a little bit. So if we move on to the next house type. Do you want me to go through all of these? Yeah. So this is the row of terrace. So plot 22 to 24. It sits on the corner of High Stairs. So it's very, very prominent in the scheme. So this is what's proposed compared to what was previously approved on the next slide. So it could be argued that, you know, the proposed house type has actually got a little bit more character to it. And then the next house type. So this is, I think this is one at the site entrance, plot 25. So this will front right onto the entrance and have a side on to High Stairs Lane. And in comparison to the previously approved house type, you know, it's not vastly different. So if we move to the next house type. So this one's, this is plot 7. So this is the one that has quite a close interaction with the boundary on the west. So in comparison to the previous approved house type. So yes, it is. I think we might get, well, widths and lengths a bit of cross-reference here. It is a little bit longer. So as you view from Prospect House, it is a little bit wider. I think I've worked out that, you know, the massing on that boundary is probably only about 10% difference. Hopefully that helps, Councillor Hancock. Is that okay? Okay.
Any other questions? Any other opening for debate? No, I'll move it for a motion then. No, I'll put a motion on the table then that we go for officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Second that, Chair.
Thank you. Off we go for roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Hartshorn.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
Abstain.
Councillor Jones.
Abstain.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Rouse.
For.
And Councillor Rough.
For.
So I make it 5 for the motion, 3 against and 3 abstained. The motion has passed, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all very much. a slight issue, but if you want a quick 5-minute break, please take it now. I am counting.
Properties to the south on Holmesdale Close are set at a lower level to the application site. So next slide, please. This is a block plan of the site, illustrating the site in comparison to the surrounding street scene. The hatched area on the plan in the northwest corner, which hopefully you can just make out, that is the extent of the two-storey extension, which is kind of infilling a little area. So you've got that, and you're also changing the hip to a pitch roof. You can see the properties on Bents Crescent are a mix of detached bungalows and semi-detached two-storey dwellings. Next slide, please. So this drawing compares the existing and the proposed front and rear elevations. As you can see, the hip is removed and replaced with a pitch roof with box dormers. The rear elevation includes a Juliet balcony, and this will be in excess of 21 metres as set out in the Successful Places guidance, and as Adrian's just confirmed, is approximately 28 metres rear to rear. Okay. Next slide, please. So the next two slides compare side elevations. As you can see, the hip is taken from the roof, and we're increasing the eaves and the ridge by 0.7 of a metre. And box dormers are included in the side elevations. The upper floor windows will be obscurely glazed and will only have high level openings, and this can be controlled by way of condition. Next slide. So this is the other side elevation. Again, the windows shown can be obscurely glazed and conditioned to be high level opening only. Next slide, please. So this shows the proposed first floor plan, illustrating the living, bathroom and bedroom accommodation to be provided. The flat roof illustrated on this plan, just to the bottom of that drawing, that will not be used as a balcony, and this has been confirmed by the applicant. And a suitably worded condition is included in the recommendation just to cover this matter. Next slide, please. So this photo shows the application site on the right-hand side and number 22 on the left there. The next slide. So this photo shows the application site there on the left and number 18 on the right. Next slide, please. So this is, helpfully taken from number 18 Bents Crescent on my site visit, and it's looking back towards the application site. So just for clarity, the proposed first floor extension will not extend above that single story element that you can see, that flat roof part. Next slide, please. This is just an example of some of the properties opposite on Bents Crescent. As you can see, it's quite a mix. You've got bungalows in the background and these semi-detached two-storey properties. And the final slide, please. This is just a view taken from the application site looking south. You can just see the roofs of properties on Holmesdale Close, just in the background there beyond that hedge. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. I believe we have 3 speakers for this application, and the first speaker is Mr. Michael Carr. If you'd like to take the seat, please. You have 3 minutes when you're ready, Mr. Carr.
Yes, you just press the microphone, thanks.
Okay, thank you. May I start? Thank you. There is a very good reason why the 9 co-objectors living directly adjacent to a bordering 20 Bents Crescent are still totally against this application, even after nearly 2 years of failed attempts by the applicants. We vehemently believe that the proposed new build contravenes the adopted local plan policy H5 and the emerging plan policy LC5. Excuse me. Both state that domestic extensions should be in keeping with the existing property and street scene in terms of their style, proportion and materials, and should avoid significant loss of privacy and amenity for neighbouring residents. My objections today revolve around that loss of privacy and amenity. This has not been satisfactorily resolved, and the new proposals will result in a significantly more prominent dwelling, which clearly will be scenically overbearing owing to its questionable design faults. The plan will also allow the obstruction of a fabulous view
over the Drone and Gosforth Valley. All those who enjoyed the Rotary 2000 walks and rambles will be denied this view as they leave the Green Lane section of the Woodland Trail, which exits opposite the bungalow. This to us is indefensible. Because of this, the development is contrary to policy D3 of the Dronfield Neighbourhood Plan and the overarching aims of the National Planning Policy Framework. Acceptance of this planning application is anomalous because the steep hillside location of all the affected properties. The angle of the declination itself is exaggerated to such a radical, and I've lost my place, just hang on, to such a radical extent that visual intrusion and loss of existing light and immediacy is inevitable. It will cause loss of social privacy. 4 bungalows, numbers 5, 7, 9 and 11 Holmesdale Close, and 7 gardens will be subjected to unwarranted visual intrusion. There isn't a hedge tall enough to resolve those problems. The residents believe that the committee should view the lay of the land around 20 Pence Crescent. They will then appreciate our concerns.
30 seconds remain.
Thank you. This is essential. As you are all aware, ours is a very conservative community which has a demographic of more than 80% retirees. We are an oasis in the centre of the vital centre of Dronfield family life. We have already suffered 2 years of anguish. Now it's a good time for the planning department to make a stand and summarily dismiss this application.
Chair.
Is that it? Do you want me to stop?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If you just remain in your seat. Are there any questions? No, if you'd like to take your seat behind. Thank you.
So. Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Christina Rogers. 3 minutes when you're ready.
The objection I'm putting forward today is in relation to item 7.5 on page 72 of your agenda, which states the surrounding street is a mix of bungalows and semi-detached properties. This makes it appear there is a similar number of each type of property. And the fact is there are just 3 pairs of semis on the crescent, amongst which only 1 pair is on the same side as the proposed extension. And that's some 5 bungalows away from the proposed extension. It's not like there's a bungalow, then a semi, then a bungalow, then a semi. The semis shown in the photograph are actually on the opposite side of the road. This project is in effect putting a 2-storey style building in amongst a row of bungalows. Now you might say that the neighbouring property at number 22, I think you've seen it with the dormer style top as a box dormer perched above their ridgeline. But from the photos on that you've seen, you will notice that they've maintained their hipped roof, still giving the frontage a bungalow style. The frontage on the proposed development will have the appearance of a 2-storey dwelling in amongst bungalows, giving the street scene a very higgledy-piggledy appearance. Also, permission for the original application of a second-storey extension was turned down, and I quote, "It would appear overly prominent and appear as an incongruous addition out of character with the surrounding street scene." I would respectfully suggest, with regards to the impact of the street scene of this amended application, nothing has changed. So I'm not sure how the council's officer could consider that this proposed extension would be of an acceptable style, proportion and materials which would complement the mixed surrounding street scene. On behalf of the neighbourhood, I request that the application for this project be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Sorry.
So
nervous.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. What number do you live at, please?
18.
Thank you.
Any questions for the officers? Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. My question.
Pardon, sorry, I've missed one out. I've kicked him off my list already. I've got one more speaker. Of the applicant, Mr. Kay.
Good afternoon.
Three minutes when you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. So, the reason we've applied for planning permission for the property is basically to extend the property due to the fact that potentially we may have to look after our my father-in-law as he's in ill health. This has been going on for 2 years now. We've changed from the original plans. I have complied as a resident every planning recommendation by the North East Derbyshire planners. So from day one, I've done everything. We've changed the aspect of the rear. We've changed the aspect of the height of the roof is not going to be any higher, so it won't impact on any views at all. We've changed. Kevin Figg, the previous planning officer, agreed that we could have windows down the side. Our neighbours at 18 said in October that if we took those 2 windows out and the 2 windows on the other side, that it wouldn't go to planning. They've obviously changed their mind about that, but I have done everything in my power to make sure that I've gone with any local planning laws. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
Thank you. Are there any questions? You can't speak any further. If you'd like to take your seat, thank you. Right, back to officers' questions. Sorry, councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Question for officers. It's about when you look at the elevation picture, either the front or the rear elevation, if you bring it up. One thing that's not that clear, and I've visited this site, and I've realised when I stood there exactly how overbearing I thought this would be. So my question is, if the officers can bring up the rear or front elevation. The bungalows are quite close together, and the drives are narrow enough for an old-fashioned car, as they would once fit. And when you stand on the drive, you can see how the ridge height, which is 0.7 meters higher, would have an effect. You could see that, and it has an effect of what 0.7 meters does. But then, if you look at that box dormer, the actual not that, but the elevation, the plans. Yeah, and what's not so clear, which I'd like clarity on, if you were to stand where it says proposed to the left of that, and you look up with your eye level, if that goes on the 0.7 of a meter, you can obviously, if you could see the ridge, you could see it would have an effect, and it looks overbearing. If you look at where the actual box dormer comes out and where the edge of that new gutter would be, if there would be a gutter there, it has the overall effect, and that's what I wanted some clarity on there. You could see where it would be, where your eye line would be, and it shows how overbearing the actual box dormer would be. And that's one of the reasons I asked this. One of the reasons why I asked this to come to committee in the first place. It has such an effect there, and you can't tell from the drawings unless you look at the front elevation and draw a line across that box dormer, the edge of that box dormer, and you could see actually how overbearing it is and how much light it would actually block out. So I wonder if you could provide some clarity on that, just the officer could. And the other one was a question around the overlooking of Rosedale Close. So that first one, please.
Just in terms of the first point, I think this is the issue that Councillor Foster's mentioning is that if you look from there, I think this is right. Councillor Foster, do correct me if I'm not right, but with the eaves being raised by the 0.7, with the gable being formed, you're then saying that the box dormer that would be viewed on both side elevations will, when you look at it, be out, so you couldn't see the apex of the roof.
Exactly.
So, and that's a consideration that you will need to take into account. But from an officer point of view, we will look at it in terms of the impact on the amenity of the the neighbours in terms of the amenity issue. So set aside what it looks like just for a second, because you'll need to consider that as well. In terms of the impact on the neighbours, we would say that because the rear face of the extension is in line with the properties either side, that the impact on the amenity of those properties, particularly those at Bents Crescent, because their outlook is towards the south, wouldn't, in our opinion, be overridingly detrimental. So I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact, but then you have to assess if that impact is harmful. And in terms of the bulk of that box dormer, yes, it will have an impact on the neighbour. There's no doubt about that. But whether it's harmful, and our view as officers is that it wouldn't be overridingly harmful. We would always place less emphasis on the protection of side windows to properties, because they can be, you can put up a 2-metre high fence next door to your neighbour, etc. So we will put more weight on the protection of that amenity than we would on rear facing or front facing windows, where you would normally expect some outlook. So I'm hoping that gives a flavour of why we've arrived at our view as officers, but yes, you will need to take that issue into account.
I appreciate that, Chair. I've got one second question. That was more about how it would look from the drive of the neighbours. Here, you see, you quite step back into 18, but as you move further nearer the car, you wouldn't see that ridge at all. That ridge would completely disappear, and all you would see is you know, it'd be blocked off completely. So it's that overbearing. And the next question was around the 28 metres, which you did provide give some clarity on at the beginning of this presentation. The 28 metres is from the actual Juliet balcony itself to the rear of the properties at Holmesdale Close. That's 28 metres, but there are some properties there with extensions. So if we look at it, what would be the distance to the rear of those extensions, roughly?
I can't be to the millimetre, but from the Juliet balcony to the rearmost extension, I'm taking number 9. So just on the drawing there, you can see number 9 on Holmesdale Close. Its rear extension isn't shown, so there is a rear extension to Holmesdale Close, and roughly the distance from the Juliet balcony to the rearmost point of that would be approximately 24 metres. No, that's not right, 26 metres, because we've taken 2 metres off the application property because they've got their single-storey rear extension, and 2 metres off the extension at Holmesdale Close. And we just weighed that in terms of the successful places, 21 metres you would normally look for. But then, of course, in this instance, you also got to take into account the topographical difference. So the difference in the levels between the application property and Holmesdale Close.
I wasn't going to come onto that until the actual debate, the topography of it. How it does look when you stood there, and you can see straight down. It faces goes straight in the rear bedroom windows. Absolutely, but I was going to come on to that in the debate.
Photograph, Chair, was Graham's sought to demonstrate that, although that photograph is taken from ground level at the application property. So it's not taken from where the Juliet balcony would be. That would be higher. Just to be fair.
Before you take the pictures away, Adrian, can you go back to one where it shows you the, dare I say it, hideous extension that's next door? So how does that affect the privacy issue of looking down onto the other bungalows? Are there windows at the back of that extension? Do we know?
In that box dormer, yeah, I believe there are windows facing forwards onto Bents Crescent. There's a side window that you can see, and there's also a window facing towards Holmesdale Close as well.
So with the proposed extension for the applicant, is it the same height as that box or less?
I think that's difficult for me to answer because I've not got the plans for that in front of me. It could be very similar. It might be slightly above it. It's hard for me to kind of And the proposed extension will be slightly further back in the roof slope, won't it? But I think what we're trying to be clear is that the first floor extension won't go any further than where you can see the downpipe. So I think what we've taken a view on as officers is that significantly harmful in privacy and amenity terms. The requirement is 21 metres, and we appreciate the topographical changes. But there's also the guidance in successful places requires 10.5 metres from the upper floor window to the rear boundary. And this comfortably meets that. I believe it's probably about 12 metres. So yes, there will be overlooking, but is that significantly harmful? I think that's what we have to weigh up here.
Any other questions for the office, Councillor Cooper?
It may not be a question, but I would have to say that from a design point of view, this application looks far more appealing than the one 2 doors away.
I think we can all agree with that one. Because that's actually right next door, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Okay, are there any further questions for the officers? No? Okay, the floor is open for debate. There is none? Oh, Councillor Foster.
There's been considerable interest in this. We've got 3 people which have come to speak, but I've had no end of people calling and emailing me. We've got 22 objections that have come through here, but I've had more than that as the ward member. It's difficult to see from these pictures because it gives you the appearance, and I think we've heard from one of the residents, there are only 3 sets of semis on that road. It's largely a road, a crescent, solely of bungalows, and 4 sets of semis, not 3 sets. I stand corrected. We shouldn't be judging this on that previous monstrosity further up the road. And as the gentleman said, he's got no privacy. That's no reason for us to pass something like this and give other residents no privacy, especially the people on Holmesdale Road. When you look at how overbearing it is, it really is. It looks right down on all those, the river, those at least 5 properties. And that's when we take into account the topographical side of things. Thank you for that. What's clear here is this was previously applied for and it was turned down by officers in 2021. It was a very, very similar second story in that case application. This is something different, and I can see that the gentleman, the applicants, wanted to work with our officers, but in practice and effect, it's much the same thing on residents. It does 2 things. One, for the residents either side, it's overbearing, which I've tried to explain when you look at that the edge of the new box dormer, and the other one, it overlooks those properties on Holmesdale Close, and you can see it. Although it's not there, it's more than the 21 metres, which is required in the Good Design Guide. It's very, very close. When you look at, we've said in 26 metres. So it's very, very close to that. So it does 2 things. So for myself, it's something we shouldn't be agreeing to here. So when it comes down to motions, for me, what it contravenes is D3. And when we look at D3 in the Dronfield Neighbourhood Plan, it's mentioned in 7.3 of page 72. It's mentioned one specific part of D3, but it's not that part which concerns me. It's another part of D3. And the officers will have this. It says should not adversely impact on general amenity and give careful consideration to noise, odour, light, and loss of light to existing properties. So that goes, that actually, if you look at that part of D3, it goes against policy there. And that's loss of light to existing properties in Good Design D3, Dronfield, and that's not being quoted by officers. I'd happily have that part answered. And when it comes to our local plan, it certainly contravenes policy LC5, residential extensions. And that, as we've heard stated already, 7.2, LC5 requires that domestic extensions should be in keeping with the existing property, should be in keeping and street scene. Certainly not when it comes to street scene in terms of their style, proportion and materials, and should avoid significant loss of privacy. This does give loss of privacy, and it is significant in my view, and amenity for neighbouring residents. So it goes against two policies there, LC5 of local plan and D3 of the Dronfield neighbourhood plan. And it's a shame not to have D3 mentioned in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comment? Councillor Hancock?
Thank you, Chair. I've got to admit, I'm a little bit torn on this one because I'm not sold on the street scene argument, because that street has got a lot of variety, and as you rightly said, the one next door is so out of keeping with everything else. It's difficult to then say, well, nothing else is going to be within street scene. But I do have concerns as to the extent of overlooking, and I'm torn as to whether there's whether it is significant overlooking on the neighbouring properties, or whether it would be acceptable given the distance. I mean, Mark knows the area much better than I do, and I know, I mean, obviously you're raising concerns in terms of that. On the side that faces this couple, the windows have gone, haven't they, from the thing? There's no window. Are they on that side? Right, yeah. So I'm still a little bit torn, but it's the privacy aspect that concerns me, if I'm truthful.
No, you can't anymore, sorry. Any further comment?
Just briefly, Chair, just on a couple of points that have been raised, just in terms of the discussion about impact on amenity. There's the two issues, and Councillor Foster's talked about the overbearance, and that's an issue you'll need to assess and consider. Just in terms of the impact on amenity to the windows per se, from looking into windows, members will note that the side windows would all be obscurely glazed, so there would be no direct looking into the neighbouring windows. So hopefully that helps on that side of things. And Councillor Foster has mentioned the issue about the bulk, and you'll need to assess that. And our view as officers is that isn't an overriding assessment. That's your planning consideration and a judgment you need to make. Just in terms of the impact on the neighbours to the rear, again, just to come back to that the minimum distances set out in successful places is met, and you need to assess then whether the difference in the levels or any other issue means that because that distance is met and exceeded, that there is still harm. So that's the judgment again that you'll need to have to take on those issues. Hope that helps, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other considerations? Councillor Foster?
Yeah, just come back on Mr. Kirkham's comments there. That distance is met, but due to the elevation and how it looks into the rear of those properties, that distance is not enough, and you can see that when you're there quite clearly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, we're at the point now. Is someone wanting to put a motion on the table? Councillor Foster?
I'm happy to propose that we go against officers' recommendations and turn down this application based on D3, the neighbourhood plan, which is very, very clear when you read. It's a shame we don't have that in front of us, and I'd happily have officers come back on that. So it should not adversely impact on general amenity and give careful consideration to noise, odour, light, and loss of light to existing properties. So that part of D3 and LC5 residential extensions, as I've already stated. So I'd like to propose that, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Liggett?
Chair, if I can just be some clarity from, first of all, on the issue of D3. Councillor Foster's right that the issue of D3 is an issue for amenity as well. We've majored on the issue of street scene at paragraph 7.3, but I take the point that Councillor Foster makes on that, Chair. Just in terms of the reason for refusal, just to be clear again, is the issue that members that Councillor Foster is concerned about is the issue on amenity, and we're not talking about the issue of design, or is it both? I'm not trying to take you down one route or the other. I just want to be clear so that
I appreciate that. It's about the massing, it's about the overbearance, it's about loss of privacy, and also the street scene. I'll come back on Councillor Hancock's comment. There's a lot of variety. It's not the case. When you go on the street, that we've had the pictures you've seen are of those semis. And then several times we've seen a picture of that awful box dormer further up. The photos are focused on that. The rest of the street is the lovely bungalows, all of them. So it's a shame that we've seen those photos because there's not a lot of variety on that road at all. Thank you, Chair.
So I've just noted down here, overbearance, loss of amenity, loss of light and impact on street scene. Thank you.
And in fact, Chair, it's to come back on that, it's much the same reasons as the last one was turned down. They didn't come to committee, the officers turned down when the applicants went for a second, for a first floor. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are we ready?
All right, okay, Chair. So the motion is to refuse officer refuse the application against officer recommendations for the reasons now just specified. Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Hartshorn.
Against.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Rouse.
Against.
And Councillor Rough.
Against.
So that's 5 for the motion and 6 against the motion has fallen, Chair.
Thank you. I'll put a motion on the table that we go for officers' recommendations. We need a seconder. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, Councillor Armitage. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Foster.
Against.
Councillor Hancock. For. Councillor Hartshorn. For. Councillor Liggett.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Rouse.
For.
And Councillor Rough. So it's 7 for the motion and 4 against. The motion has passed, Chair.
Thank you. Right, that's the main section of that business. Late representations done. Planning appeals.
You just see, Chair, that there were 2 appeals lodged during the last 4 weeks. Any further decisions we get will report in due course, but there's no reported decisions in the past 4 weeks, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you. I don't have any matters of urgency, but what has been brought to my attention is that we all know Julie Hill, that was part of our group before she became ill. She's part of the singing group for dementia, and it's a CD they've released, is it? Is it a CD that Julie's now on? Yes. So if you'd like to dig deep, it's going to a worthy cause for dementia, and I'm not sure where you can purchase it. Online, thank you. So please look out for it. And it just for me to say, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you back in January. Thank you.